Everyone makes mistakes. Most of them are small, and some can even be big. Like when your partner accuses you of cheating when you're just playing a multiplayer game with your friends. And while some people might be forgiven for their missteps, others may suffer greater consequences than they bargained for. For example, if you show up late to work after making a wrong turn and hitting every red light on the way, you might get fired. But in other situations, one simple mistake can spell catastrophe. Take, for example, the time an American pilot accidentally dropped an entire nuclear weapon. Now, that's not the sort of thing you hear about every day, but it does raise the question, how many times has this actually happened? And if we're all walking disaster waiting to happen, is there any hope for humanity's future, or will we doom ourselves with our next misstep? If you think you already know where this is going, stick around because things aren't always what they seem. It was 1961 and the height of the Cold War. Tensions were at an all-time high between the Soviet Union and the rest of the world. The threat of mutually assured destruction hung over everyone's heads. And despite lots of hand-wringing, not much could be done to lower the threat level. After all, nuclear weapons are kind of hard to get rid of once you have them. So nations kept stockpiling theirs, and no one really knew what would start World War III. It could be a miscalculation, an accident, or it could be nothing at all. Maybe the whole thing would just fizzle out before anyone had to make a tough decision. But in the meantime, countries were still training for potential conflicts, and that meant practicing dropping bombs. On March 23rd, 2 United States Air Force pilots were scheduled to test drop a Mark 39 nuclear weapon from 35,000 feet into a Utah lake. And everything went according to plan until the bomb exploded. Well, not exactly where it was supposed to, but more on that later. As soon as the plane carrying the bomb took off, the 2 pilots knew something was off. They felt the plane shake violently, and both men immediately suspected they had lost the nuclear weapon. But after checking the indicators, it seemed like everything was fine. So they carried on to the testing site, hoping the bomb would deploy properly when it reached the target. At the control center, Mission Control couldn't believe their eyes. The bomb's radar signature indicated it had left the aircraft and was heading directly toward a restricted zone where military buildings and equipment were stored. Mission Control tried to contact the pilots to divert them away from the dangerous course, but the radio was dead. Then they saw the bomb detonate in the sky above the base. When the dust settled, they found a crater near the armory and no sign of the bomb itself. At first, Major General Sam V. Wilson, commander of the 49th Air Division, believed the Air Force personnel were at fault. He assumed the armory crew had loaded the wrong bomb and given the pilots a live one instead of a dummy. But soon, he learned the truth. The nuclear device had been working perfectly well, and the only reason it exploded in the sky was because the release mechanism had failed. Pilot error. So how did this happen? First, let's take a look at the plane. The B-47 bomber was used during and after World War II, and up until the 1980s. It was originally designed as a fast, high-altitude bomber, which made it perfect for dropping conventional munitions on distant targets. But it wasn't specifically designed for nuclear warfare. In fact, the B-47 was so vulnerable that it couldn't survive a direct hit from enemy anti-aircraft fire. And so, a special effort was needed to adapt it to carry the massive bombs safely. This was achieved by attaching a ricochet-style release mechanism to the bomb bay doors, which allowed the heavy device to be released at altitude without damaging the plane. But this system had some downsides. As it turned out, the rack was sometimes unreliable, often failing to open the doors fully, which would cause airflow problems at high speeds. A fix was developed. Wedge-shaped metal plates were installed behind the racks to ensure the doors opened properly. But these weren't foolproof either. As it turned out, if the plates were bent or didn't fit correctly, the racks wouldn't open and the bomb wouldn't detach. And that's exactly what happened to the faulty device carried by the doomed plane. Unfortunately, neither pilot was aware of the problem, nor the previous mechanical issues related to the release mechanism. Instead, they were focused on something else, namely getting the right readings from their instruments. This plane had previously experienced what's called a radar tumble, where the plane's transponders got confused and started giving erratic readings. This was due to electronic interference, but it put the pilots on edge, and they were wary of anything electronic on the plane. So when they tested the bomb release mechanism manually, they ignored the fact that the indicator lights weren't functioning. It looked good to go, so they gave the green light to release the bomb. But since the actual mechanism was jammed, it didn't open the rear doors all the way, and the bomb never left the plane. The pilots kept flying the route and eventually decided to return to base. All the while, they were sitting on a nuclear bomb that was slowly being damaged by turbulence and jostling around. Eventually, the jostling caused the faulty release mechanism to finally give way, and the bomb fell out of the plane and exploded. If the crew hadn't noticed the bomb missing and gone back, who knows where it might have landed? In the end, they escaped with a reprimand, but things could have been very different. But what if it wasn't pilot error? What if someone purposely dropped a nuclear weapon? Could a single person bring about the end of the world? In 1980, an Air Force major named Harold Herring was assigned to help develop new launch procedures for nuclear warheads. His job was to simulate various scenarios to ensure the best possible outcome in case of a real-world situation. That included accidental launches. During his studies, Harrington came to a grim conclusion. Any launch procedure, even the most stringent, could be beaten with enough effort. The security systems could be disabled, and the necessary codes could be stolen or simply ignored. One man could potentially launch a nuclear weapon. He wrote a classified report detailing his findings and sent it to the Secretary of the Air Force. He hoped his report would lead to better safeguards, but instead became the target of a large-scale cover-up. The report was stamped "Eyes Only" and circulated among a few high-ranking officials, but efforts were quickly taken to keep the contents confidential. Harrington himself was transferred several times and kept in the dark about what was happening, but he knew he had hit a nerve. A few years later, he managed to obtain a copy of his own report and began circulating it among congressmen. But before he could blow the whistle publicly, he was charged with leaking classified documents and sentenced to 5 years in prison. Once inside, he attempted suicide and was later diagnosed with chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, possibly from the radiation exposure. He was released in 1993 and died in 2011. Now, it's not known if Harrington ever revealed the contents of his report, but it's likely the Air Force tightened their protocols. Otherwise, another disgruntled employee could have launched a nuclear warhead and ended the world. In fact, it almost happened twice. On September 23, 1995, a Russian major from the 45th Anti-Aircraft Missile Brigade, stationed near the city of Olenia, was preparing to perform maintenance on a Topol intercontinental ballistic missile. Lieutenant Colonel Sergei K. Filimonov approached the missile with a toolbox and prepared to drill a hole in its protective casing. It was supposed to be a routine maintenance check, but it quickly turned into a nightmare. As he drilled, the missile's motion sensors kicked into gear, and it took off from its silo. Filimonov dove out of the way and watched in horror as the missile disappeared into the sky. He immediately contacted command and told them what had happened. It seems a small piece of metal from his toolbox had become lodged in the missile's pressure gauge and activated its emergency launch sequence. It was the closest the world ever came to a nuclear apocalypse. An investigation into the incident uncovered sloppy maintenance practices and questionable safety protocols. But the real blame lay with the Soviet military's obsolescent technology. Since the end of the Cold War, Russia has worked hard to modernize its arsenal. And today, the country claims its nuclear forces are safer than ever. Whether or not that's true, There's one thing we know for sure. One person can indeed end the world. But maybe that isn't such a bad thing. Every year, scientists warn us about global catastrophes, climate change, pandemics, asteroid impacts. We humans love to doom ourselves. But in the end, maybe we should thank the natural order of things. After all, a little death clears the way for new life. And maybe the same can be said about the planet. When the Earth dies, it gives way to a new world, one hopefully better suited for life. The truth is, no one can predict the future. But if history tells us anything, it's that we'll probably find a way to screw it up. If you want to learn more about the insane risks we all take living on a spaceship, hurtling through space, check out this video. Or if you'd rather see what it would take to fight a war against aliens, click here.